Hey y'all, thanks for coming back to Colorful Story. You're here watching another episode of Face Facts Friday. We are traveling through the Reconstruction era and seeing how that has impacted the Black community today. Today's topic is going to be on Black stereotypes, aka blackface, and crazy stuff that people make up in their minds to be afraid of Black people. Now, I know some of you have heard some of the stereotypes about Black people, whether it's the watermelon and fried chicken or the lazy, loud, unintelligent Negro. You know, all these ridiculous stereotypes that come up every once in a while. You'll hear about them when describing Black people. And most of the time we know where they come from, but, you know, we're going to dive into that a little bit. I know one of our most popular one is blackface during Halloween. For some reason, every Halloween, somebody dresses up in blackface and forgets that it's racist every year. And it's on social media. So here's a reminder, it is racist. Now, in the early Jim Crow era, minstrel shows were this big thing. They were all the rage. It was when white folks would dress up as Black folks, not like you and I, but they would put on this makeup that is black as tar and call it the way that Black people look. They would emphasize the nose by enhancing it. They would draw big red lips on. They would enhance the eyes, make it big. They would almost look unreal. And then they would begin to mimic the way that Black people talk in this very uneducated manner. Some people like to say it was a bootleg version of early AAVE. I like to call it trash. Now, one of your most prominent figures of minstrel shows was Sambo. He looked really animalistic. And they wanted to enhance his features because they wanted to make him look almost subhuman, like he wasn't supposed to be that way, to put more emphasis on how Black people were not human, like they were meant to be property. Now, remember the scientist Louis Augustus? He used minstrel shows to justify his scientific theory that Black people were subhuman and that minstrel shows embodied the true nature of the Negro. That's right. Black people dressed up as caricatures. White people dressed up as Black caricatures was considered a scientific phenomenon. Foolishness. So as images like Sambo became mass produced, they proved to be more dangerous than funny. So they would sell products like soap and say they're going to wash the Black off of them. So if you were Black, the soap would get the Black off of you to make you come out looking white, which means you were pure and you were clean. See how that sounds terrible? People would not understand that Black people can't use soap to get their melanin off, or at least pretend they didn't. But you know. Now then they would take certain products and say, oh, well, the Black people are like coffee beans. They're dark like coffee beans. Or they use Black caricatures to sell syrup. Now, most people like to believe Aunt Jemima was this old little sweet woman just on a bottle of syrup, but that was also as an early form of Black caricatures and the way that they used Blackness to profit. That is why there's part of a big argument behind the Aunt Jemima bottle. They used her image to profit and gave none of her family whose image they got it from to reimburse them the money that they made. So Blackness was highly profitable, almost like it is today, you know? Now, how did these stereotypes turn into something completely dangerous? Let's get into it. So Black males were considered to be predators. So those depictions from Sambo made them look very burly and grotesque. So they looked like predators. And there was this narrative that black men, black boys, and black children were deviant, thieves, and want to rape white women and take their purity. Now let's take a brief pause for a moment. Keep in mind, enslavers used to rape black women or force them to breed with black men and then sell their babies for profit. They would sell their own half-white babies for profit. But yes, black men are the actual predators. Black children are the actual predators. I digress. Rant over. Now let's get into this false narrative of how we got here. So a bunch of white supremacists got together and created this narrative that bastardizes interracial dating. So they came up with this pretend ball in 1864 in response to Abraham Lincoln trying to free black people and give black men the right to vote. And they called it a ball where it would be a mixing of races. It's called the miscegenation ball, where they would mingle. They would say that it is a breeding ground for black men and black women to get together. Now, it was fake, completely fake, but this was like their ad campaign. If I can make it similar to something we hear about today, the government is coming to take your guns. Nobody's coming here to take your guns, just like nobody was there to rape white women. Now, of course, white supremacists had a response. So in March 28th, 1868, a Louisiana newspaper said this because they wanted to say it with their whole chest and make sure we understood. If you don't want Negro equality forced upon you, go to the polls and vote against the proposed Constitution. Framed by the social, domestic bastards, catamites, scalawags, slubberdigillions, cow thieves, and jaywalkers of Louisiana. If you don't want your wives and daughters to be insulted by insolent and depraved Negro vagabonds, go to the polls and vote against the new Constitution. If you are opposed to amalgamation and miscegenation, vote against the new Constitution. I mean, well, they said it with their chests. They didn't want us to be free. They didn't want black men to be involved with white women. Apparently, there's this huge attack. Or so they say. So get this. The day before, the Separate Car Act was passed. This was after Plessy versus Ferguson. The New Orleans Times Democrat newspaper wrote, a man should be able to protect his wife and his daughter from the burly Negro. They should vote to keep the white race pure and keep them from mixing, even if that meant not sitting on the same streetcar as them. Now, they wanted to take it so far of not mixing. They were pushing segregation not only in relationships, but in mutual seating areas. Honey, it's the miracle whip for me. Now, if you haven't noticed, there's always this narrative that paints black people as violent, rapists, or ignorant just to get some kind of policy passed or to wreak havoc on the black community and justify it. This is how stereotypes can be dangerous. There were many lynchings that came during the Reconstruction era into the Jim Crow era. Now, there was these false cries of rape that was happening big time, especially throughout the South, where you would see in a newspaper that a black man raped a white woman, but you didn't know which white woman and you didn't know which black man. So they used this to go into black towns and black neighborhoods and either burn the town, hang the people, or both. And to show just how proud they were of their cruelty, they took these lynchings and put them on postcards and mailed them out. you know, because what else would you do after you just finished murdering somebody? You know, you create a postcard and then start a barbecue with your young children there to witness. These things also took place during the 4th of July to exercise their rights of independence and freedom. Yay! Growing up, I was made aware of some of the Black experiences that Black men faced by growing up in a barbershop. So my mom was a cosmetologist, a barber stylist. So we were in there every Saturday, and I would hear some of the conversations some of the men would have, right? So every weekend was like an educational experience about Black culture and Black men in general. And what ended up showing up was the topic of white women. Now, get this. You would hear the old heads talk to the young ones and say, if you ever find yourself alone with a white woman, get out and run fast. Now, I didn't understand this very young. I did not understand what they meant by that. I didn't understand why would you do such a thing? It's just a person, right? Well, apparently this was not to be anti-white people, but it was more so self-preservation, right? So Black men are fairly categorized or unfairly categorized as these predators based on stereotypes, right? And so this is something that has been taught to little white girls very early on. That's why you see white women clutch their purse. That's why sometimes they feel comfortable calling the police on you when you're doing absolutely nothing but minding your business, right? So this was a survival teaching and less about making it about two different races, right? Well, keep in mind, all a white woman had to do was feel threatened. She didn't have to be threatened. She had the audacity to feel threatened. And we'll get into that right now. Now, we've seen how dangerous these stereotypes can be when it comes to Black people with the Amy Cooper case, where she called the police on a Black man who was bird watching. She said on video that she would call the police and let them know that an African American man was attacking her. She knew what she was doing. We see that with the Exonerated Five, the Scottsboro Boys, Emmett Till, Glover Lynn 4, and so many cases where white women are claiming they were raped by Black men, but that was not the case. Not just Black men, but Black children. So the weaponizing of Black males and Black people in general is a cultural thing to make sure that Black people are harmed unfairly and tried unfairly. So what happened to some of these white women and the police and the prosecutors who were involved in all of this? Nothing, frankly. One of the most famous cases is Carolyn Bryant in 2017. She came out and said that she lied about Emmett Till raping her. She lived a full life and she's still alive. And she came out and said that she lied. And this mother, Mrs. Till, came out and said, you know, how she felt like she wanted to keep the casket open because of what they'd done to her son. And she had to live all those years knowing that the woman who accused her son of raping her lied. We tend to think stereotypes of our community aren't a big deal, but clearly they can be very dangerous. Hopefully, if we cannot get justice for the past, we can hold people accountable today so that we can change the way that we handle these things in the future. So I want to highlight some of the products that I use. These are the Juvia's Place palettes that I use for this look. The setting powder is Sahara. The highlighter is Nefertiti. I use the number 13 in concealer and the Ethiopia foundation. For my lip, I use the crayon case in color Bear. And for my setting powder, my setting spray and my primer, I use Beauty Bakery. The setting spray, and the primer was the baking oil. All of these are Black women-owned businesses. Let's celebrate them this Women's History Month. Thank you so much for tuning in to Face Facts Friday here on Colorful Story, and I'll see you next time.